What's up? It's your boy D Change coming at ya with another Daily Dave. Today, I got to have a pretty good conversation with my dad. Now, to set up some of the context, when I was younger, my dad and I had a pretty close relationship. I feel like, um, I think it stems from kind of being the the youngest and the only son, where like we could share some very common like male dominated interests, right? Like fishing, basketball, sports, um even computers to some degree. Video games not so much, but I tried. I remember moments of childhood of just trying to bond with my dad. um Things kind of changed at some point. We both got older. I think he might have gone through like a kind of a tumultuous time at work. Um, I grew into adolescence. Clearly, my priorities changed, and I was much more worried about peer group social standing and stuff like that. I did gravitate more towards just spending a lot of time on computers, uh, potentially to my detriment. He's always a man who's like, like just into like, hey, if you work hard and go to school, that's good, and make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, as in like, job security, that type of stuff. Just kind of the typical immigrant story of I want my kids to succeed, so they should put themselves in the best place they can, right? And for me, it was more like, I want to like, I just want to do fun stuff. I just want to hang out with my friends. I want to play Counter Strike and tank my grades. You know, I was really interested in diving into the internet and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess things kind of cooled down. Um, there were some times where we would still go fishing on the weekends together, but then that stopped eventually. Of course, through high school and then into college, where I would come home pretty much every weekend because I was only 30 minutes away from campus. But my time was much more focused on my peer group, like my friends, and trying to hang out and catch up with people back at home versus not the people at school and stuff like that. And I think at some point we kind of we just don't have the same interests anymore, or like we have diverging interests. So this is just a really long-winded way to say that like currently, and my dad and I are cool. It's just we're not like super close. Like you could make the argument that we have a very typical East Asian father-son relationship, but I definitely feel like he's chilled out a lot compared to before. He's definitely not as strict. He's definitely much more just like, whatever, man, do it, just do what you want. That type of attitude. So, um, yeah. But what was interesting was I walked into the kitchen today and I saw papaya in the sink. So I was just like, hey, Dad, is this a papaya from the backyard? And he's like, yeah, it fell off today, so I picked it up. I'm gonna try eating it. I was like, all right. To give you into If you didn't know, we have papaya trees in our backyard, and so that's the crazy thing because I was like, oh, like where'd you get this from? Because like I noticed the other day I walked outside and I noticed there's papaya trees, in our backyard because it's like a tall tree that's kind of thin, and at the top, all the papaya fruit kind of grow and congregate in this one area. And then I asked my dad, like, hey, do we still have peach trees? Because growing up, we had a ton of peach trees. Like, I feel like at the height of it, I think we had like six of them that were like really big and just constantly dropping peach bombs everywhere. It was so bad that like birds and bugs and everything would get to would get to like the peach fruit faster than we could. You know, it's just like there's the tree and then the ground is filled with like fruit flesh, and I'm like, what? You know? At least that's how I felt about it. But my dad actually like legit likes gardening. He's he's just super into like planting trees, replanting them, moving them around, germination. One thing I find super cute, by the way, is as like an elementary school science experiment, I germinated some like lima beans. Which basically what you do is you take a paper towel, you fold it up, you soak it in water, or you drench it in water, put it in a Ziploc bag, and then put some beans spaced out between each other. You seal the bag, and then you leave it somewhere kind of cool, dry, and like away from the sun. And eventually, some of these beans will like sprout, and if you plant these at some point after they've kind of, gotten much longer, you can potentially have a tree on your hands. You can have a fully grown plant. You can have a tree in however long it takes to grow. Like it might be years or whatever. But so what's funny is I think my dad saw that when I was a kid, and he started doing that with all kinds of beans and seeds that he would collect. Like we would literally sometimes be gifted like fruit and stuff, and like it's like, hey, let's keep the seeds. I want to see if these grow. And I thought like, wow, and I guess it didn't really cross my mind until much later when I started seeing bags and bags of seeds like just chilling inside our house. Some of them germinating, some of them rotting. Like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And I think my dad has tried a lot of different plants, and I think it's like super cool that he does that. Now that I take a step back and just really think about it, because that garden of ours in the backyard is mostly his cultivation, right? It's all his labor, especially since he's been retired for how many years now. Like that's something that I would think would take a significant amount of his time. And so he was saying, oh yeah, like let me show you like the peach trees that we have, because our old ones died, and so he put in like two new ones kind of near one of our dividing walls with our neighbor. He's like, you see that? You see the fruit over there? Yeah, it's next to like the dragon fruit and this other tree. And I was like, what are you like? Excuse me, like dragon fruit? And I started going like, wait a minute, wait, what are all these? What's this? What's that? Like, what are we looking at here? He's like, yeah, come out here and look. And so he just started pointing out every single tree that he has like planted from a fruit that either he's germinated, or like maybe they bought the plant from Costco that was already like ready to be planted. And he basically showed me his entire plant collection. And I thought that was really sweet, because that's something that we haven't talked about in a really long time. And I can tell it interests him, right? And in a way, that's kind of the point here, right? Is that sometimes I would feel like I don't have the greatest relationship with my dad, but I also feel like, and I would kind of, I would take that perspective of like, oh, he just doesn't care, or he's not interested, right? But at the same time, it's like, if I'm not interested and I'm not willing to put, my hand out, or I'm not willing to, extend an olive branch, so to speak. Again, we're not on bad terms. Then it's like, well, what do you expect, right? The other day, when I was I was about to put together my new computer. I was cleaning it up and taking out the old parts, and he walked by and asked me what I was doing, because he was like, "Oh, are you cleaning out the computer?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm cleaning it out, but I'm also taking out the old parts so that I can get it ready for my new parts. I bought some new ones, and I'm gonna put it together and make a new computer." And he's like, "Oh, like you keeping up to date, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's pretty much, And yeah, I just realized that like there are plenty of times where he subtly wanted to start a conversation, or like, kind of just get to know what I'm in a way, who I am and what I'm doing, right? because yeah, obviously we live in the same house. We eat dinner together. Now we eat lunch together. Um, but our family's been perfectly happy with like sometimes just legitimately silent dinners, which might sound really strange to some people. I know for some people it's like this is really awkward. Um, and it's not super awkward to me and my sisters because I think we grew up in an environment where there were times where like as children, it's like, hey, just chill out. Now is not the time for you to ramble on and off, and the conversation is predominantly controlled by the parents or by the parents and grandparents or the adults at the table, right? So say what you will, that's just the environment we were in. I definitely wouldn't go as far to say this was like incredibly detrimental, but it does shape how you know we do perceive things and how we act. And it's become much more clear to me as time has gone on that like everything that happens to you when you're a kid matters. Like childhood trauma, significant events, feelings, how you handle certain behaviors, what you learn from your parents, what you learn from the environment around you, your aunts, your uncles, your grandparents, your cousins, other kids, all of that. You soak all of it in and it makes you into who you are. And it's just so fascinating, you know? So I feel like I became much more self-aware of some of the like the problems or the demons I wanted to conquer in myself um during my time in Tokyo. And that's when I started the DailyDave, right? That's when I started talking about my vulnerabilities and my problems, so to speak, right? I think before that I was always testing the waters with people. Like I would say, oh, self-deprecating humor, just so popular, so that's so me, right? But it might have been some sort of mechanism for reaching out and seeing if there was someone who was able to listen. Because I have to admit, there I do feel like there are times where it is difficult to kind of express those things to specifically my father. I don't think that's his strong suit, right? To like talk out feelings and stuff like that. But I've really come to appreciate, the times I do have with him, like those brief conversations where it's just like, I think years ago he would have been like, "Oh, you young kids are just lazy," whereas now he's like, "Yeah, it's tough for you guys. I don't know, like no one stays at a company past 5 or 10 years anymore. Like I don't know what you're supposed to do," you know. And I'm like, wow. So he does understand, so he does know things change, right? Um, but yeah, it just so happened that I saw Papaya in the sink, and that led to basically me and my dad just having some bonding time because we went out to the backyard, and I told him about how I remember this tree used to be here, and I remember this used to be like, wasn't this somewhere else? And what is this? Like, have you gotten fruit from this? How long does it take? And just get to know more about what he spends his time on, right? I asked him how long does he spend in the garden every day, and he said, "Oh, at least a couple hours, because I gotta water the plants every day, so that's like an hour." And then other times he might be trimming something, trimming the leaves, pruning a bush or like a plant or a tree, or just straight up using fertilizer or digging up one plant and moving it to another one, or repotting plants, germinating. So it's really interesting. And I was like, wow, he's got this whole like operation going on, and it's really cool because every now and then, well, especially with the papayas, my mom makes this beef papaya peanut soup. It's pretty good. We've been having a lot of that recently. We've been sourcing from our own garden, our own backyard, which I think is super cool. Like we got a ton of oranges. We can make some orange juice. But yeah, we got other plants there that sometimes it's just like, oh, look at this, look at these leafy vegetables that we have that have been boiled straight from the backyard. So it's nice. It's nice. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of a cool concept in this day and age, when especially since I'm such a, like, would you call it a technocrat? No. I'm just kind of a technophile, right? I'm just really into like modern stuff. But like ironically, I don't see myself as particularly cutting edge. Like I'm slower to adopt certain things, like, you know, like certain new social media platforms now. A lot of gadgets, I'm not particularly an early adopter of those anymore. Even with computers now, I feel like I don't I don't keep up with the stuff a lot anymore. So I'm asking like friends, like, what are the recommendations? You know, what are the builds that people are talking about? And I just go off of that now. You know, so it's interesting. Maybe I'm losing my edge, unfortunately. So it's like, hey, maybe we got to step it up again, right? And in a way, I feel like this is a really good, not distraction, but a good like alternative point of view, because I've talked about it quite a bit, but I'm concerned about the future. I'm concerned about what direction I'm headed in career wise, uh, particularly because I feel like a lot rides on that. And this is a very unfair pressure to put on myself, and I realize that, but it's still a matter of what kind of a job am I going to get, what kind of a career am I going to grow, which will lead to higher social status, settling down with someone, starting a family, providing for them, buying a house, settling down, you know, raising a family, etc., 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 etc. So I try not to think of things too far in advance where it's like incredibly overwhelming, but my mind is really good at kind of racing to that point. So sometimes it's just really good to take a couple steps out into the backyard, into the garden, and just appreciate the scenery. Just look at these plants, these colorful fruits, and I don't know. There's something very calming about observing nature, hearing the birds chirp, seeing the blue sky up above. There was like no cloud in sight today, and yeah, it was very, I don't know. I just felt very at peace at that time. So yeah, and then my dad asked about like how my job's going, and if our sister, like how our sister's doing, my sister's doing, not his. And yeah, it's just it was a nice. I feel like I had a nice father son moment. Um, this might not seem this. I feel like it's interesting. I was a little hesitant to talk about this because maybe for some people this is like super normal, or maybe this is not a big deal. Um, but to me, I guess because yeah, it's not every day that I walk out into the garden with my dad just to go over all the fruits. You know, it's not like we're surveying it and pull out my clipboard. Like, all right, let's make sure we got all the fruit inventory ready, right? But yeah, it's something that's been on my mind purely because of the whole like, you know, mortality issue, right? Coronavirus has really made me more aware of impending more mortality. Not because I think I'm gonna like we're gonna get it or anything, but more like, you know, there are things out there that we can't control, and there are things out there that can end any one of us any day, right? Um, and yeah, it makes me kind of just realize, yeah, like there are things I want to do while I still have time here. There are things I want to do while my parents still have time here. So I'm just very glad, honestly. I'm just very happy that we shared that moment together. You know, sure, I might not be making progress on like the Chang family, uh, what do you call it, family tree, or like the Chang family like legacy documentary slash like, I don't know, vault of secrets or whatever, because I want to know about my parents' like histories and backgrounds and their extended family and stuff like that. You know, it's just a very difficult subject to just suddenly bring up, right? But I'm just, you know, I'm just glad. I'm just glad that I got to hang out with my dad, you know, just for a little bit. So anyway, um that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you in the next one. Peace out.